Malcolm Hoenlein is with us. We call it the Weekly Update, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Mr. Hoenlein, welcome back to JM in the AM.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. And Mazel Tov again. It was an amazing simcha. And you should only have a lot of nachas and good health.
Appreciate that very much. And it was wonderful having you there. And those of you who are curious, yes, Mr. Hoenlein was, in fact, honored with one of the blessings under the chuppah. That is, thank God, how close our families have become over all these decades. Malcolm, I got to start with this, and I know that you're very sensitive to this, so it's not like I'm preaching to you. And I don't want to preach to anybody, because it's not anybody's fault that we're 6,000 miles away and don't understand what our brothers and sisters are going through. But I have a relative in Israel who asked if I wanted to be informed every time that her family has to go into shelters because of sirens. And I said, yeah. They thought they were bothering me, and I'm like, yeah, I want to know. I want to know every time, because, I need to build up a sensitivity to this. And just yesterday, just Thursday, Malcolm, just Thursday, okay, it's 25 days with this war already, just yesterday, just Thursday. These timestamps are Eastern time, our time over here. 1:30 a.m., sirens. 4:30 a.m., sirens. 4:59 a.m., sirens again. 7:23 a.m., sirens. 11:08 a.m., sirens. 11:51 a.m., sirens. 7:57 p.m., sirens. And then today, Friday, 7:18 a.m., which would be 2:18 in the afternoon, Erev Shabbos in Israel, sirens. And again, I know you're sensitive to this, but we need to remind ourselves of what our brothers and sisters are going through every single day during this war. Your reaction?
It is true that people read about it. I know that people who have the alarm or alert system on their phones and listen whenever the red alerts, right? And I was sitting with somebody in a meeting yesterday, and all of a sudden their phone went off again and again. It's the numbers are astonishing. I spoke to somebody yesterday afternoon. She told me that they had 10 alerts, 10 missiles in the region of her home. She lives near Tel Aviv. I have a grandson, as you know, made Aliyah, and I hear from him how many times they have to take the children sleep in the Cheder Atum, in the safe room. But it's so disruptive of life that people can't go out without thinking about how close they are to a safe room or public safe room or a private one, and that their life it gets dominated by the alarms, and there's no indication that it's going to stop. How Iran can continue to do it mystifies people, but the fact is that it shows you how great the infrastructure is, how much there is inherent in the system that is redundant, that they can take out every day launchers and underground facilities and storage facilities, and still they are able to mount this campaign. And should they, God forbid, emerge from this, they will be able to say that they won, that they survived, the coalition that is rising against them in the region. I think the domestic thing we will see after the fighting stops is when you usually start a revolution. But even the fact that you haven't had manifestations in the streets in the way that people thought that they would be, and there are reports that people in the administration have told us to people in Israel that the expectations have not been lived up to. Well, you saw that 50,000 people were killed in January. That's a big disincentive, and 700,000 besieged were given rifles and told to go to the streets to shoot to kill. And people, it's just a suicide mission for them to go and demonstrate. Yet they still do. They even projected this week a huge star, a flag of Israel with the Magen David, huge, on an apartment building in the middle of Tehran. So there are still remarkable things happening. And we hope that that this is a temporary lull, and that we won't see this end in a stalemate where they can emerge. You see how Hamas is now rebuilding and claiming that they have 60,000 guys and planning another attack and another October 7th against Israel.
On the first point, though, we have a president of the United States who, if you're going to take him for his word, and if you're not going to listen to other opinions, you would think that all capabilities of Iran have been obliterated. And yet, as you said, they keep bouncing back, and they keep, rearming and thinking of ways to keep Israel engaged and Israel's citizens engaged in these bombings and rocket attacks. So which is it? Is the president? I mean, I know it's hard. This is a really tough question. I ask you this every single week, and it's impossible to answer. But is he exaggerating? Is he giving us any accurate information? Are the majority of the systems obliterated, and therefore he's really telling us the truth? Yet there's certain things they weren't able to get to. What's the truth?
No, it's certainly true that the vast majority of the infrastructure, 18,000 sites have been hit, I think, collectively by the U.S. and Israel. And there has been a lot of destruction. They tried not to kill civilians. They tried not to hit infrastructure. That's why they knocked out the electricity. You don't want to turn the population against you. And while they and the vast majority of the people, maybe 80, 90%, are against the regime, you don't want to ignite the nationalistic fervor which Iranians have. They feel very loyal to their Iranian heritage and Iranian state, but not to the Iranian regime. That that the damage that has been done is not exaggerated. How they are able yet to continue to launch, and it's not comparable to what they did, but they launched 2,100 times against the UAE, and people don't read that in the way that we see the attacks against Israel. When you think about it, it was many more times against UAE than against Israel. The amount of weapons they have, all of those stories that we read, we spoke about, and the capacity that we talked about, which will try to be denied now, and people will try to diminish it and say that Israel misled them and others misled them. Ask anybody in any of the Gulf states whether they were misled when they see the damage that has really been done in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and in countries that, like Qatar, that were allied in many ways with Iran. So I know people tend to be skeptical and they ask a lot of questions, and President Trump has a tendency to feign sometimes and to put forward motions that we don't understand and necessarily that don't end up being the way that sometimes he intended. But he's put the markers down for Iran. There are talks going on with Agrachi and with others, we believe, even though nobody will say that they're talking to them.
But there seems like, last summer, there always seemed like there was an exit strategy during those 12 days. And then, of course, after 12 days, it was over. But there always seemed to be an exit strategy. Maybe he managed expectations better than he did this time, because all he kept focusing on was regime change. And I wonder if he's feeling he'll be embarrassed, or the U.S. will be embarrassed if there isn't regime change and this thing comes to some type of peace agreement. So I'm just hoping, and I know there's negotiations, we'll talk about that in a second, and and some type of ceasefire discussion is happening, but I think it would only be bad, and therefore I'll use the expression, God forbid, he gets mired into a campaign that's impossible to extricate from, that's impossible to end. And I don't know, again, I know you don't like making predictions, but to a degree, don't you think that he's sort of heading in that direction?
It very well could be. I mean, there are a lot of mixed messages that come out, and you have people in the administration that we know, maybe even including the vice president, who have their own views of the war, and he's now supposedly going to be involved in some of the negotiations, and Marco Rubio. So we will have to see actually how it plays out, and people should not get depressed or get too excited about individual statements. We have to see this in the longer run. I would say in the next few days, we will see. He gave an extension for 10 days, but that doesn't mean, where he said that they would stop bombing the power infrastructure. That didn't say it would stop everything. And they will, I believe in the media and the woke media, especially the hostile media, which is increasing against Israel, that they will more and more try to shift the onus on, or exaggerating the capacity to deal with the Iranian threat. So you people calm down, wait and see. we're in the front. We have right now, the first obligation is to support the people of Israel, make sure everybody has a Pesach. There have a lot of families whose husbands are being called up. They authorized 400,000 more call-ups. I think that a lot of the statements that we see coming out of Israel from some Israeli leaders are damaging and irresponsible at times, and always using hyperbole and exaggerated terms. The fact is that this could be a long slog. If you see in Lebanon, we hardly read about it. You don't read about in Syria that Shara is using this opportunity to crack down and to reintroduce a lot of the Islamist practices and demands on people, on women, on others, restricting them. And then he gets blowback, as he did from the Christians this week, because they try to ban alcohol. So they made it a more limited ban. But he's taking advantage of it, and so is Hamas, and so are others. We have a lot of fronts to be concerned about and to look at. So don't rush to judgment. Yeah. Try to read what you can, but know that the president looks at the price of oil, and he looks at the commitments that have to be made, and with the other eyes looking at a November election and the hostile media, which I'm sure gets to him. It's human nature.
Yeah, but he expresses it. He doesn't have the ability to suppress it.
Completely.
It's unbelievable. And the price of oil, boy, not to complain when our brothers and sisters in Israel are going through what they're going through, but the gallon per gas right now is pretty outrageous. I'm sure in certain parts of this country it's even worse than here. And honestly, we have some frustration, obviously. We have 1% of the frustration that our brothers and sisters in Israel have, because, the whole issue of traveling to Israel is a big one. And we've discussed it, and I've pointed out that there have been other wars where Israel's been able to keep the corridor between North America and Israel very, very active. And obviously this time around, it's very, very different, something we can't understand. We're not military people. Or security people, but it is very, very different. It's frustrating, but what I think is even more frustrating, and we feel it more, is what everyone's going through in Israel. And the reason we feel it more is I think we're in an era in the diaspora where we have the most relatives, including immediate relatives, living in Israel. You go back 20 years and not as many children and grandchildren collectively of diaspora Jewry who are living in Israel. Now that number, thank God, just continues to increase more and more and more. So the frustration there and really around the world just continues to build.
I think that's absolutely true. Also, we have such instant communication, right, and pictures on every front because of drones, because of other things that even the media have some drones that they use for pictures. And the reporting that everybody, sometimes irresponsibly, because, one of the reasons why Israel doesn't want them reporting is because it helps the enemy target more effectively when they know exactly where the rockets are hitting. Otherwise, they don't know. They don't have satellites that are monitoring it that we know of.
Right.
So you're right. It's a whole different system. And also we have a different climate in the United States.
Right.
That you think after October 7th, the temporary sympathy, but the fact that you can have such blatant and open hostility, not bordering on anti-Semitism, actual anti-Semitism, it's real. And I think, we have to think about what the next step will be, what will happen in the region. It could end up being remarkably positive for Israel. I think the Abraham Accords, a lot of the Gulf states now see that there's only one reliable aircraft carrier that's permanently there, that that will stand up and fight the battle that all of them want. They want Israel to finish the job. They don't want this to stop. You see the UAE, Saudi Arabia, others, even Qatar and others have issued condemnations throughout, the Iranian ambassador from Lebanon. A lot of stuff that is happening, but I understand people are confused, and there are a lot of potential outcomes that we have to look at.
Right.
But be very careful with conclusions you draw.
Understood. I think it's even more frustration than confusion, but I hear you. It's America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listener-sponsored digital radio. Around the world, the web at NachumSegal.com and the Nachum Segal Network, and, of course, the beloved NSN app. Weekly update, Malcolm Hoenlein's with us, Erev Shabbos HaGadol. Next weekly update, please God, on the 17th of April. Do your best to stay tuned in to the news of the day and of the week, folks, even during the holiday break. What do you make of the threats that the president makes toward European leaders who don't want to participate, NATO in general, and their pretty lukewarm approach to all this? Does it basically tell us that the European leadership gets the feeling or knows definitively that the street in their countries, the people, the citizens, are just not interested in them participating in any way in this military effort with the U.S.?
In most cases, they don't control their own streets. And in most cases, they are already have succumbed and have put up the white flag and putting their own future in danger because of it, and not standing up to their own domestic threats, let alone the foreign threats. Right. The war in Ukraine continues, et cetera. And we see that without the U.S., they know that they would be nowhere in defending themselves against the threat. With the Iranians said all along they didn't have the ability to shoot a ballistic missile and a long-range missile. And here they fire one 4,000 kilometers to Diego Garcia, which is a British-American base. And so the lie was completely exposed. But most of all, that it can hit the capitals of Europe. So they have always been under the microscope. Ultimately, the goal is to hit the United States. But the leaders hardly reacted to the revelation and the demonstration, public demonstration of the capacity that the Iranians had to hit in a long-distance target and fire 2 missiles actually at Diego Garcia. So the Europeans are feckless. The Europeans are again demonstrating a spineless approach. Look, Iran is not a small country. Iran is not Gaza. Iran is the size of Italy, England, and France put together, or Germany put together. Right. It's a country with 100 million people. The people are ready to take action. They've given up on the Europeans. Their only hope is what the United States and Israel will do, and it's why they're popular there. But we've seen serious things. The Haifa refinery getting targeted, other things that all of which cumulatively are serious threats and dangers. But the Europeans, were they to stand up now? For the first time, Britain said they would lead an armada or lead the naval defense to open up the straits, because they're all paying a heavy price for the gas, and they will have the domestic backlash no matter what. Had they joined maybe the forces, we would be further ahead against Iran if they had seen a unified and more robust actions on the part of the Europeans. And they are the front line. It's much closer than it is to the United States. So the fact that now they said that they would put naval ships there, 20 countries, 25 countries, but we haven't seen any action in that regard. And I know the messages are confusing from the United States, whether they're talking, they're not talking. Another 10 days, and the negotiations are going on. And does the president really want a deal? And tells Israeli leaders have been told that they really want a deal. I understand why people are confused and disheartened. And in fact, we could spend a whole hour just talking about the details of what really is going on, whether there's a war of attrition, whether there's other things happening or could happen, whether there is a real out of this without a ground invasion, which a lot of people in this country and elsewhere will resist.
Yeah, of course. And what worries me is that the more of a desire expressed by the U.S. to make that deal, the more resistant Iran will be, because they'll take it as desperation. They'll take it like, oh boy, the United States is desperate now because they've got to get out of this thing. So that's why it's sort of like a catch-22, especially dealing with an enemy that doesn't care, how they're perceived or whether they're, going to go ahead and launch more and more rockets against, the U.S. allies in the Middle East. So,
and we've removed layer after layer of the leadership. And we know that there is hardly any coherent government left in Iran. The IRGC is taken over and is giving the orders, but you see that in the naval exercises and the fact that it took out the head of the Navy yesterday. There are great successes in what is being done, and the pinpoint nature, which has kept the number of civilian casualties, so low. But it tells you how much has to be done when all of this stuff is underground. You could drop 5,000-pound bombs, 1, 2, 20, and still not eradicate the threat that they can always come out, an hour later and they launch it. And remember, the launchers are inside mountains. They come out for 5 minutes. They launch. They load the rockets, and they have to heat them up. So that does take time till they're able to generate it. But so Israel tries to follow where they're being launched from and go right after them immediately after the rockets are launched. So all this stuff doesn't get out to the public, and to understand how complicated and difficult it is and how much redundancy there is in their system. But most of all, the cluster bombs is a change from what we faced in the past from them.
Right, you explained that to us last week. So they've expressed no desire to continue speaking to the team of Kushner and Witkoff. That's why Vance and Rubio are even more prominent now in these conversations. But what did you think of the whole request, demand that Witkoff and Kushner take a step back?
I think that they are talking, that there is communication going on. Remember, there aren't that many people at the high level because they've been removed. And so whether Agrachi, the foreign minister, is really engaged, whether there's somebody else, other people, there are very few people who have broad authority because they've been eliminated. And we still don't see the popular uprising or the ability to create an alternative regime, a coalition of all the different ethnic and majority group to be successor regime. And the intimidation worked, the killing of 50,000 people. I mean, families still, many thousands don't know what happened to their loved ones or family members who were killed in January. Right. So, all of these things are playing. And when they see weakness in the West, then they say, we put our lives on the line and we're going to do this and we're going to be abandoned in the end. So there's hesitation about it. But look, the lies have been put to all the claims. There's nobody who will say today Iran didn't have a nuclear program, Iran didn't have a ballistic missile program, Iran, all the things that they said they didn't have. And they still are threatening and have their terror network worldwide that they could still activate. They haven't done it by and large, though there have been some attempts, and I think people have to be very careful over Pesach, especially in big gatherings, about to be cautious, not to take...
you should tell that to the Pesach programs.
I absolutely have told it to Pesach programs. I think they've been told by security. You'll see the New York police are going to add patrols to over Yom Tov, but it's when you have places in very remote areas, it becomes a danger that we have to take seriously. So caution, not panic, and not canceling your trips, but to make sure that proper precautions are taken.
How many hours before a scheduled flight, especially who wants to get stuck in an airport for Pesach, how many hours before a scheduled flight are you recommending people go to the airport with this whole TSA situation?
In 15 minutes, they should leave. No,
they should leave now. That's funny.
That first of all, we hope that it might be relieved that the president is ordering the payment to the TSA workers. And I heard from one last night that maybe it's possible that in the next 2 days it'll be over. But people should know that even if it's over, it still will be a huge backup because this is a heavy travel week. And still, I would tell people to get there at least 3 hours. But I know people who've been 5 hours early and missed their flights.
Wow.
So, but it depends where also. And it shifts in different places if there are workers or not. So people should not take it lightly and try to do as much as they can before with getting the no touch and the if they have clear or MTSA pre-check. All those things do help, from what I've been told, people who've been flying, to facilitate cutting back the time somewhat.
Yeah, and then, of course, people go 4 hours in advance and end up, sitting at the gate for 4 hours because they got through in 5 minutes. You just don't know. It's such an unknown. You just have no idea what's going to happen when you get to the airport.
Exactly. But you know what? Better safe than a lot of people who've been sorry.
Oh, I get that. Did I misunderstand this news story this week? Is the United Nations now, in fact, hopping aboard this concept of disarming Hamas?
Well, it is part of the agreement, so it's not that they're jumping on board. The problem is that it's not happening, and we are seeing Hamas rearming, reorganizing, and it's something obviously of concern to Israel. It's one of the reasons they need to have the potential call up of so many people, because they need for various fronts. It's not just Iran; it's obviously Lebanon, and Israel has done a very good job and trying to clear the area up to the Litani River, which will give a buffer to Israel. I regret the statements by the defense minister. He uses words like invasion and occupation without knowing what the words, the way it can be exploited here. It's not their intention. They're not looking to reoccupy Lebanon. They're looking to stop the rockets, and they see that more and more of the people in Lebanon support it. You know, they want to get rid of Hezbollah, and the fact that the government took measures against them. But I would say that the actions in Gaza, which don't get that much attention, we have to, of course, watch the Syrian situation, as I mentioned before. There's still a lot of fronts that, and the Houthis have never been activated in this war yet.
I mean, this is going to really throw this is going to dampen the prospects of the, what did the president call it? The Board of Peace? I forgot already what it's called. I mean, if this is one of the conditions and they're ignoring it and rearming, then, I mean, this whole rebuilding of Gaza is, which many thought and were skeptical about to begin with, is basically going to be, history.
Well, I think that the Board of Peace could be, if it's a broad enough coalition, A, they want to rebuild and they want to, do it under the right controls. B, to try to disarm and create a domestic police force. But the first thing, disarmament, denazification, all these things that they're supposed to do, and the rebuilding are all put on hold right now. But this agenda is not going away.
I get that. It is going to, it's funny. We talked about we're not going to talk for a couple of weeks. I mean, the next couple of weeks can be really, really critical in all of this on every front that you mentioned, frankly.
On every front, and we see, some of the activities in the Gulf, for instance, in other areas, the attacks on Jordan, and whether we can use the opportunity to build alliances to emerge from this with a different, the Abraham Accords strengthened. Many things could happen the next week. Every day is actually going to be interesting in the Chinese curse way. May you live in interesting times. Right. But it will certainly be interesting, and every day we'll see new developments. And 2 weeks is going to be a lifetime in this case, because of the intensity and so many fronts, and the domestic front, the anti-Semitism here, whether it's all the developments in New York that we see, it's overload, and I know that, and I'm trying not to let people become depressed. There's no basis for depression. It's activation. We have to be stronger. We have to stand stronger. We have to help Israel more now. The people in Israel, especially for the Chag, we have to make sure that every family is taken care of. And the challenge is for us. We see that it's a global challenge. It can't separate what's happening to Israel, and the threats to Israel are the threats we are facing here, the threats that they're facing in Europe. It's a global war, and we are being tested as well. Does never again really mean something? Did we learn the lessons of the past? Listen to the Haggadah, you'll get the answers.
Very, very good point. Finally, I need you to hop on my bandwagon. My annual, I don't know, for the last many years I've done this already, my annual plea to the rabbis out there. I know how important the regulations of the Haggadah and the Seder are. And I know that there's a place in the Shabbos HaGadol Drasha and the Shabbos HaGadol sermon for those regulations and further discussion about them. But, Malcolm, wouldn't you agree with me that tomorrow is a golden opportunity for rabbis around the world to speak about the national mission, to speak about how the Exodus leads to the establishment of a presence in the land of Israel, which is, of course, the final step of the exodus from Egypt, and that this is really an opportunity to focus on a true, serious national message, in addition to whatever details about Pesach they want to review.
100%, and we shouldn't separate the two. We are living what could be different aspects of what the Jews went through in that period, and what the lessons that we derived and the messages. First of all, I will not go to a shul that doesn't say at least Tehillim for the soldiers at the davening, and everybody should demand, if their shul isn't doing it, go to the rabbi, talk to them. If if they could say the prayer for the Chayalim, for the Medina, if not, at least to say a couple Kapitel Tehillim, because we should recognize this is all of us. We all are involved in this war. This is a war against all of us. Israel is the front line, taking the brunt of it for us. And all of us who have children and grandchildren there know it and feel it, maybe a little bit more, but and there's no one who should feel that this is not their future at stake. And every Rav has I think it's a chiyuv to go out there and give a warning and a srod to people, just as we would warn them if there was something wrong with a product, right, everybody would jump on it. Right. But here we have something so much more fundamental and essential that everybody should be talking about it, and every family at the Seder should take time to talk about it.
100%. Wishing you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Thanks again for sharing in the big Simcha. Have a wonderful Yontif, and please, God will speak after the holiday.
Have a great Shabbos Shever Brachot, and everybody should have a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a safe one. Remember in our tefillos, our brothers and sisters who are facing the danger up front, and for our own futures.
Amen to that. Thank you, Malcolm. Malcolm Hoenlein, Conference of President, Major American Jewish Organizations, a weekly update. Fridays here at JM and the AM. The next one, please God, on the 17th of April.